الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book, or we'll be starting discussing the book Talkhis Nukhbatul Fikr, and as we had mentioned that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah have authored a book that is called Nukhbatul Fikr, and this book it discusses Mustalah al-Hadith. So matter that relates to or pertain to the topic of ilm of qawaid ilm al-Hadith, then this particular work that it tries to cover some of those principles and guidelines. So we had an introduction regarding the science of Hadith, Ibn Hajar, and the book that we'll be studying, which is the book that we have mentioned here, which is a upgrade from what we had started with before. And this book goes a little bit more details regarding certain matters, and also by way of what will be explained. So as we had said, that we'll be using one of the talkhis of those who have somewhat made a summary of the book of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah as the material to be studied. So as for start today, we'll now start directly into the book of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah that we have, and the author rahimahullah that he mentioned here regarding concerning, so Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, when he started this particular thesis, which is a small thesis that is somewhat written in a way which is easy for one to memorize, and also he put emphasis regarding giving definition and also putting different categorization of matter that relates to ilm al-hadith. So he mentioned in the start of the book, he started by mentioning concerning matter that relates in why, the purpose behind why he wrote the book. That was something that was asked by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah for him to put this book together. So something that was requested by him, as he mentioned regarding concerning him putting this book together. And they mentioned regarding that of those who sought of this request were some of the they mentioned that either two individuals are mentioned, as mentioned by Al-Qari in his explanation, that he mentioned that of those who have asked or requested Ibn Hajar rahimahullah to put this book together regarding something on ilm al-hadith, and also that is somewhat brief. Also, later on, he was asked to make an explanation of this thesis that he wrote. So he was asked initially to put this work together, something brief and concise regarding ilm al-hadith, or mustalah, as referred to as mustalah al-hadith, and then after he was asked to make an explanation, which he did both. So they mentioned, or have been mentioned, that those who made this request regarding for Ibn Hajar rahimahullah to write this thesis and also to explain what he had wrote, that they mentioned two individuals are mentioned, or others, that they mention one, as mentioned by Ali al-Qari, that he mentioned Az-Zarkashi as being one of them. So he mentioned Az-Zarkashi being one of those who they mentioned, the first being Az-Zarkashi, who they mentioned Shamsuddin Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Zarkashi rahimahullah ta'ala. And the second that they mentioned Izzuddin ibn Jama. Izzuddin ibn Jama. So they mentioned that these of those who asked Ibn Hajar rahimahullah to put together this particular thesis, and also the same request was made regarding him given an explanation. So showed the ulama before that at times they'll be requested to compile certain work so others can benefit. And also he was asked, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah was asked again a second time for him to explain. And this because others before he wrote the book have explained the book, and they wanted him to comment Ibn Hajar directly on the points that he have written. So that's concerning that particular point. Then they discuss Ibn Hajar rahimahullah the different stages, or the stages in which ilm al-mustalah was somewhat codified. So also he mentioned in this small small risala the works or the efforts of the ulama regarding codifying ilm mustalah al-hadith, and he mentioned regarding the names of those who were involved in this. And also we had mentioned those before. So said starting with Rama Hurmuzi, and we reach up to the point of Ibn Hajar, and before Ibn Hajar we have of those works of the work of Ibn Salah, Muqaddamat Ibn Salah as referred to as, and you have many who after Ibn Salah that have done work around his work, which is by way of explanations or hawashi, brief notes, or those who made summaries, ikhtisar. So you have different work that was done by the work around the work of Ibn Salah, and then Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he came after, and then kind of somewhat he put this work together kind of somewhat to make it become the main standard in ilm al-hadith, to make this work one of the main standard regarding this particular field and area. So as for what is mentioned here, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, as in this Muqtasar, he mentioned that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that he mentioned, as he stated here, تقسيم الخبر بالاعتبار وصوله إلينا. By Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, the first that he discussed after his introduction, then he goes into matters that relates to تقسيم الخبر, which is al-khabar, that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah even himself went into explain concerning what he intend by khabar, by saying al-khabar, it have a meaning which is muradif lil hadith. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned that the word khabar, yanqasim, as mentioned, al-khabar yanqasim bil-ittibar. So this sentence means that he will categorize khabar by way of it reaching us into two categories. So looking at a khabar, information that have reached us, by way of it have reached us, that he mentioned that it is in two categories. So first they discuss taqsim al-khabar. So this dividing or categorizing of a khabar, which khabar means concerning that, information, that but what is intended here by khabar, as Ibn Hajar rahimahullah have mentioned, that khabar, that with the ulama of hadith, muradif lil hadith. So with the ulama of hadith, that the word khabar at time it is used meaning hadith. Maja'an, one of those things that have come upon, those things that have been mentioned upon the Prophet ﷺ, so things that have been narrated or transmitted upon the Prophet ﷺ is referred to as khabar hadith. Or I mention al-hadith goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, and khabar goes back to other than him, the Prophet ﷺ. So things regarding the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, then referred to as khabar. And then I mentioned that also it have a meaning which is ashmal, that is more also general, which include hadith nabawiyya wa athar salafiyya, or athar a'immat salaf. So khabar have different meanings, but in this case, in this regard, is more inclined towards the more general meaning of al-khabar, by way of what information have reached us. As he mentioned, huwa qismain, it can be divided into qismain, mahsur bi'adadin, أو ويسمى الآحاد وغير محصور بعدد. So that which have come by way of many narration, as Ibn Hajar mentioned, غير محصور بعدد له طرق لا حصر لها. So he mentioned that information that either it has restricted ways, or let's say طرق that they have reached us, or it have a many ways in which, or it have been narrated by many, and that information have reached us, or information have reached us but have come by a restricted amount of narrators. So he mentioned regarding that unrestricted amount of narrators, with a meaning that have transmitted by many narrators, he referred to it as ahadith ahad, or ahadith al-mutawatir. So it have unrestricted, numerous narrators is referred to as ahadith mutawatir. And those that have a restricted, a limited amount of narrators, then it is referred to as ahad. So that's where he started with this discussion, dividing or categorizing ahadith wal khabar into two types. The first type, that which is said to be mutawatir or mutawatir, and the second would have multiple, many, numerous narrators of that information, and the second which is ahad, and that will be that one which have a limited amount of narrators narrating this information. Then he went into, in this mukhtasar, tarif tawatur or mutawatir. So he went into now giving an explanation as to what is meant by the first category, which is ahadith mutawatir or tawatur. So they mentioned regarding this matter with the distinction or this discussion regarding hadith mutawatir, there are certain things that we'll try to cover, and can be a lengthy discussion, but we try to summarize it and give some main points. So one is clear regarding how this matter is viewed by the ulama, and we'll mention we'll try to cover some of these main points. So you'll find that this discussion regarding a hadith being classified as being a hadith mutawatir, and second hadith al-ahad. Much can be said, but we try to, as we said, try to summarize and give some main points. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he went on to explain as to what is intended by a hadith al-mutawatir. So which give the definition that can be stated as he mentioned regarding that hadith mutawatir, linguistically it has the meaning. So linguistically it would take the meaning of hadith meaning a hadith al-mutawatir, meaning or tawatur, meaning concerning tatabu. So something which is followed one after another in full succession. So something which is come in full succession and there's no interruption. So they mention the rain as being tawatur, meaning the rain falling, tawatur, is continuously falling without any interruption or stopping for a while, but continuous falling for a set time. That is tawatur and nuzul al-matar. Or ishtihar, something is known, tawatur, by way of something become known. So that's the linguistic meaning of mutawatir or tawatur. Istilahan, you have definitions that are mentioned regarding a hadith mutawatir. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah and this Muqtasar, I didn't mention the exact wording of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, but as for what he mentioned regarding concerning a hadith mutawatir, he mentioned إما أن يكون له طرق أي أسانيد كثيرة لأن طرق الجمع طريق. Then they mentioned that then I mentioned what is at-turuq. So the word at-turuq in the ulama al-hadith, it means at-turuq could mean the word min turuq, meaning tariq, ways in which a hadith is narrated, or isnad, or asanid. So you have the word sanad, isnad, or turuq. Those words are generally that they are words that have similar meaning, interchangeable amongst ulama of hadith in most part. Some make a slight difference, but they mention that those words generally regarding concern that looking by way of how the hadith have reached us, or those who have transmitted that information. So that referred to as turuq. So they mention hikayat tariqat al-matan. So it's the description of how the matan have reached us. So a description of how the matan has reached us, or silsila rawat, or the silsila rawat, or it's the chain of narrators of the matan, of the text of the hadith. That is said to be turuq, or isnad, or sanad. And Ibn Hajar, of those who kind of somewhat see that the meaning is similar. The meaning of those words are similar. Then Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he start then to mention regarding matters relating to hadith mutawatir, what the meaning that he gives, it goes on concerning that, rawahu jama' is narrated by a group, and mithlihim, so a group narrating on a group, a large group narrating upon a large group. Where the ulama mentioned that from the start, and that will include that this large group, that they're consistent as being a large number from in the beginning of the hadith, from the start of the hadith, in the middle of the hadith, and at the end of the hadith. So throughout the hadith, that large group is present, as being transmitting one upon another. So they mention rawahu jama' and mislihim, a group narrated by a group, mimma yastahil tawafuquhum ala kadhib, where there it is impossible for them to agree upon something which is a lie or a khata. So it becomes impossible for them to all agree upon stating something that is a lie or something which is an error. Asnadahu wa asnadadu ila shayhin mahsus, and also that thing can be referred back to something which is mahsus, something which is either seen or something that was heard. So something that they were a witness to. So that is what they refer to as Hadith al-Mutawatir. So Hadith al-Mutawatir is a hadith that many narrators have narrated that information. Also, they were unable, it becomes impossible for them to agree upon giving misinformation or a lie or incorrect information. And also that matter that they are narrating is something, it goes back to something which is mahsus, something that it is physical, something which is physical, or something that they have either seen or heard. Something that they have seen or heard, not something that they are thinking of, but something which is seen, that they have witnessed, or something that they have heard. So this is what they refer to as Hadith al-Mutawatir. So that's the definition in broad. It surrounds that meaning of mutawatir. So as we mentioned, Jam, they did not agree upon something which is a lie or an error. And third, the information that they are passing from one to another, it is something which is something that they have all seen or they have all heard that information or heard that thing themselves. So that is what I refer to as Hadith al-Mutawatir in brief. By way of, then you'll find, then some add, yufid al-ilm al-yaqini. That is also some add that it yufid ilm al-yaqini. Yufid al-ilm al-yaqini. That also, that information that the person is unable to reject it because that it is convincing information. So he has no misgivings about the information. He has no doubt about the information. So the hadith is somewhat information for him is convincing that it feels al-ilm yaqini. So the person is clear about that information. So he's convinced about the information. He has conviction about that information from what he has received. That is what they define as Hadith al-Mutawatir. With Hadith al-Mutawatir, regarding the definition that have been given by Ibn Hajar, so you'll find that that definition that have been mentioned as a Hadith al-Mutawatir that we have just given, and the meaning that has given Hadith al-Mutawatir is somewhat very similar. That definition also that is mentioned by Ibn Hajar when he explained it in his book, when he explained this, that's the definition. That's also the general definition of Hadith Mutawatir that is given by the Usuliyin. So the ones who have given the definition that is mentioned by Ibn Hajar and those who have written in the field of Hadith, Mustalah Hadith, that have defined Hadith Mutawatir, that's the general, is like a crossover, or they have taken what is mentioned in the book of Usul al-Fiqh and use it in and place and mention it in the book of Hadith. So it's a crossover or taken from what has been mentioned in the books of Usul al-Fiqh and placed in the book of Mustalah, this definition of what is said to be Hadith Mutawatir. And the reason for this, as we'll discuss, that the word Mutawatir in the ulama, so of old, Bukhari, Muslim, and the likes, Awza'i, and of those ulama of older the classical scholars of the Salaf, when they use the word, amongst the ulama of hadith, when they use the word mutawatir, that they did use that term, but they didn't that definition we'll discuss. So they use that term, but as to how they explained it, it somewhat changed. The definition is changed and become the standard definition, is what we just mentioned, that is taken from the ulama usul al-fiqh. So the word mutawatir is used in the books of hadith. It's the general definition used in the books of usul al-fiqh. Yes, the ulama of hadith of old did use the word tawatur, mutawatir. But we'll discuss as to under what context and in what meaning. Next, regarding tawatur, this meaning, that you find that the first amongst the ulama of hadith that introduce regarding hadith mutawatir in the books of hadith of mustalah, they mentioned the first of those who did so was Khatib al-Baghdadi, al-Hafiz Khatib al-Baghdadi, in his book al-Kifaya. So as I mentioned before, one of the important books of hadith in mustalah al-hadith is the book of Kifaya, al-Kifaya, by Hafiz Khatib al-Baghdadi, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he mentioned in the early part of that book of Al-Kifaya, in the opening chapters, he mentioned regarding hadith being classified, divided into two categories, mutawatir wal ahad. And he mentioned a few words about this, so he did mention and give a definition of a hadith mutawatir, which, as we mentioned before, can be said taken from the books of the ulama of usul al-fiqh, as we had mentioned, the same thing Ibn Hajar. Then, so Khatib al-Baghdadi is said to be the first to have mentioned and discussed a hadith mutawatir in the books of mustalah or ulum al-hadith. The next who came after was Ibn Salah in his book, as referred to as Muqaddimah Ibn Salah, even though that's not the name of the book. So Ma'rifah, Anwa, Ilm or Ulum al-Hadith, that's the more name of the book of Ibn Salah, that is referred to as Muqaddimah Ibn Salah. So Ibn Salah rahimahullah ta'ala, when in his book, when he discussed concerning Ilm al-Mustalah and terminology of Mustalah, then in the 30th, around the 30th chapter of his book, he discussed Hadith al-Mashhur. And in Hadith al-Mashhur, he also discussed, he also mentioned something regarding Hadith Mutawatir, and gave also a definition that was similar to that of Khatib al-Baghdadi. So it's mentioned in that light in those two books, and the ulama of hadith have mentioned that before Khatib al-Baghdadi, there was no definition given regarding Hadith Mutawatir as what we know it today. The general history regarding Hadith Mutawatir that the ulama have mentioned, who have written on this topic in relation to Ilm al-Hadith, that the word mutawatir of them, Al-Shaykh Thanah Allah Al-Zahidi, one of the ulama of Hind, who's still alive, and a book called Fusul that relates to Mustalah al-Hadith, that he have mentioned, that this and others, few others have mentioned, that this emerged, this mutawatir wal ahad, it came from Yunan, from the Greeks, regarding ilm al-mantiq indahum, with them, and falsafa, they have this taqsimat. But as for ulum al-sharia, then it wasn't something that was known amongst the salaf, of grading things as ahad, and after that all these rules to ahad al-mutawatir, those things wasn't known with the salaf as it is known today. So that of those who can somewhat introduce it in the science of Islam, they mention that the person who introduced it, you have a discussion said, is the Mu'tazila, regarding dividing hadith into mutawatir wal ahadith al ahad, that this came about, this was introduced in the science of Islam by the Mu'tazila. And they mentioned of the name of the person that this is attributed to one of the Shaykh of the Mu'tazila, Abu Bakr Asam. So Abu Bakr Asam, Mu'tazili, who died 201 Al-Hijri, that his name is Abdul Rahman Ibn Kaysan, Asam, and he mentions Kunya Abu Bakr, and one of the Sheikh of the Mu'tazila. So he's the one who it is attributed that he's the one who kind of somewhat of the early ones to introduce us with the science or have that discussion, and then kind of somewhat developed and became a matter discussed in usul al-fiqh, and then also introducing ilm al-hadith. But then you find others who start then to discuss it in the science of usul al-fiqh and the likes. And that distinction, as well, so they have that distinction then start to be mentioned in the books of the ulama, in usul al-fiqh. Then also it was mentioned in the books of ulum al-hadith, mustalah al-hadith, as we mentioned, Khatib al-Baghdadi, then in brief, then Ibn Salah, and then also Ibn Hajar, and then kind of somewhat developed in between, then developed since then. Most of that discussion is related to, regarding hadith mutawatir, is in reality related to ilm al-usul al-fiqh, or discussed in usul al-fiqh, not as much in ilm al-hadith. But taken, whatever is discussing is taken from usul al-fiqh. Of the thing that they discuss regarding concern, as for the ulama al-hadith, as we mentioned, that they use the word mutawatir, was used in their vocabulary. So you find that Awza'i rahimahullah قال وفي ذلك آثار متواتر. So آثار وفي ذلك الآثار متواتر وبذلك تواتر أحاديث. Also you find the likes of Al-Bukhari rahimahullah, Imam Al-Bukhari rahimahullah, also kind of somewhat use this word mutawatir. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah will use the word mutawatir in some of his works, that he mentioned that in his book Al-Qira'ah Khalf al-Imam, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he will mention regarding, as he mentioned, قد تواتر الروايات كلها أن النبي عليه السلام, no, that Imam Muslim, sorry, he mentioned تواتر الخبر أن رسول عليه السلام لا صلاة إلا بقراءة القرآن. So he mentioned that تواتر الخبر أن النبي عليه السلام لا صلاة إلا بقراءة القرآن. So he mentioned regarding concerning this matter. So Imam Bukhari may use the word قد تواتر or تواتر الخبر. So he used the word تواتر. And also further, Imam Muslim rahimahullah, third Imam Muslim rahimahullah, قال تواتر الروايات كلها أن النبي عليه السلام جهر بالآمين. So they mentioned, so what he meant by this, they all mentioned what was meant by this, what they intend by this. What they intend regarding the use of the word tawatir, ishtihar. That's something which becomes, it is known. It is somewhat well reported that the Prophet Islam, that he did such and such, or such and such a hadith on this matter. So the word ishtihar, not the meaning that is taken as given by Ibn Hajar and those before and after him. That's not what Imam Bukhari and Awzahi and Imam Muslim in the book At-Tamyiz, that he used the word mutawatir. So others came and they started to use this word. Even Hakim used the word mutawatir as understood by the ulama before him. Bukhari, which is mean the word that the hadith mutatabi' or the hadith mushtahar, it is known regarding this narration on this particular topic. So that's concerned all the ulama of the early scholars. They use the word mutawatir in its more linguistic meaning. So in the more linguistic meaning, not in the meaning given by the ulama of usul al-fiqh. And this occurred after the 3rd century onwards. Then the word mutawatir now start a different start to have a different the meaning as given by the ulama of usul al-fiqh. There, in this matter, they discuss also concerning shurut al-mutawatir. So they mentioned that shurut al-mutawatir, that goes into different, that others have mentioned. For example, Ibn Jama' in his book Muqtasar of the book of Ibn Salah, when he discussed hadith mutawatir, that Ibn Jama' rahimahullah, that regarding shurut al-mutawatir. So the ulama, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, mentioned around 4 to 5 shurut of hadith mutawatir. So Ibn Jama, so they mentioned different conditions. Of those conditions that they mentioned regarding hadith mutawatir, that they will state that of shurut, that rawahu jama or kathar, rawahu jamun kathir, that is narrated by many. The ulama of usul al-fiqh, then they between themselves, they disagree regarding this large number. How much is it? Some mention 5, some mention 7, some mention this number, it is 10, some mention 20, some mention 40, some mention 300 and plus. So you have different numbers that is given regarding this jam, this condition of, they mention jam kathir, how much people are required in each level. What's the least? Some say 5, some say 7, some say 12, some say 20, some say different numbers that are given, but they have not agreed upon a number. So that's one of the that's one of the conditions they mentioned. So ulama, some mention the more correct view. There's no fixed number. There's no fixed number regarding this jam kathir, this large number of narrators that are required in every number, in every tabaqah, every generation. There's no set number, and that's the view taken by Ibn Hajar and muhaqqiqin al-hadith. The second criteria that they mentioned, that the second criteria that they mentioned, that it is something to become impossible, mustahil, tawafuquhum ala kadhib wal qata, that those people are unable to all agree upon something which is incorrect. So that's the next condition. And the third condition that is they mention that that it must go back to something which is mahsus, that it must go back to something which is something that either all those people saw for themselves or they heard for themselves. Not something that they were thinking about, but something that was physical. Smell, something that they saw or heard. They're giving information about something they heard or something that they all saw. Then they start to add regarding concerning the other conditions. So Ibn Jamal mentions that only 3 conditions. Everything after them is invalid. Those conditions, they have no value, according to Ibn Jamal, as he mentioned in his book. So of the other condition that they mentioned, that yufid al-ilm. Yufid al-ilm. That hadith al-mutawatir, that of the criteria is that yufid al-ilm. That is something they said ilm al-yaqini or ilm al-dururi or ilm al-qat'i. You have all these words that are used. So they use the word ilm qat'i, ilm dururi, ilm yaqini. So these words mean concerned to that they have, and then they themselves disagree regarding concerning what these dururi, yaqini, qat'i means. That's a next discussion. So, but they use those terms regarding concerning that this knowledge is something which is that it is overly convincing, where there's no shubha, the person have no doubt, no shak, no shubha, no misgivings about the information, is not unconvinced. So those are the criteria they mentioned regarding this particular matter. So that's concerning that discussion regarding those criteria. You have others that they have put. Then when they meant, and also of the thing that so that's concerning the matter regarding what's the criteria or shurut or condition of mutawatir. We said 3, others mentioned 4 criteria, others mentioned 5 criteria, but I'll mention a difference between those who have that discussion. So say whatever mentioned regarding these criteria in the books of hadith is really taken from the books of usul al-fiqh. Then after discussion, they mention hujjiyah, khabar mutawatir wal khabar ahad, which is the main one of the main discussion on this topic. And the reason for this, I would said the ones who kind of somewhat was behind this matter المتكلم, as I mentioned, ulama mutakallimun, and also the Afghan and the ulama amongst the Muslims who are said to be from the Mu'tazila. So the Mu'tazila, and we know that in the Mu'tazila that they have misgivings regarding hadith. They have their own shubha regarding hadith. So they kind of somewhat start to this matter now, because this matter now impact on other areas regarding, when I mentioned that ilm al-hadith, it feels that of the criteria concerned that it necessitates yaqeen, something is absolute, if you want to use that word, or you're complete convinced, absolute conviction. They can also mention, we use the word yaqini, qat'i, then they say that wal dururi, and what is not is said to be dhanni. Then this come into what they said, hujjiyat, khabar, mutawatir, wal ahad. By way of those people, Ahl Kalam wa Mu'tazila, matters relating to matam concern usul al-din, they disagree regarding our next discussion regarding what is intended by them regarding usul al-din wa furu' or qat'i wa dhan'i. It starts to now impact on other things regarding ahkam al-shar'iyyah. And also matters that i'tiqad, we mentioned, they now put a rule, matters that relates to i'tiqad, belief, it must be qat'i. Qat'i mean tawatur. So hadith, which is dhanni, meaning ahad, then they have some type of caution in the use of those hadith, or at times misgivings or rejection. So hadith which is ahad in matter of i'tiqad, then they start to have their own, as we said, caution regarding the use of those hadith, and also at times they are told, all right, dismissal of those hadith and refusal of use of refusal of using those hadith regarding matters that relates to al-i'tiqad. So that's how those matters kind of somewhat spill over into other things. So it may seem this simple, but it's something which is, I say, it goes into other fears, other matters that are more serious. So that's concerning. So I said now with ilm al-hadith that so that somewhat I like this matter. That's as one inshallah that this have his own discussion, but it's just I like the matter regarding hadith mutawatir, that it comes down to those matters with those people of that way inclined. So we have the discussion, we mentioned the meaning linguistically, tatabu' wa ishtihar, the meaning istilahan, as we say with ulama of hadith, they didn't per se have their own definition of hadith mutawatir. The language that was used by mutawatir, istimal al-ulama al-hadith of the ulama of old was and the classical of the ulama, initially was used regarding meaning ishtihar, something which is known, but without giving it that type of meaning as what it became later on. Also, they have shurut, or these criteria of when hadith is said to be mutawatir, and we have mentioned 3, some say 3, 4, 5 upwards. That's a discussion between those. Then we said the people who discuss this matter, really, it is matter discussed more so in the area of usul al-fiqh. As for hadith al-mutawatir, the ulama of hadith now have a discussion regarding, does hadith referred to as mutawatir, where they classify hadith al-mutawatir lafdan wa ma'na. Lafdan wa ma'na wal ma'na. So hadith mutawatir, have a discussion, the next discussion is hadith mutawatir, they categorize as those hadith that are said to be mutawatir, that it is lafdan wa ma'na, that the meaning and the wording itself is one. Lafdan. So the wording that are used by the Prophet ﷺ is just one wording. They said in the case of those hadith of that nature, that mutawatir lafdan, the wording is exactly the same in all its narrations. You have many narrators narrating the same hadith over and over again, and all using the same word. They mention, maybe one or two hadith, very rare. And the prime example that is used in this matter, the hadith, man kadiba alayha muta'ammidan, that the one who lies upon me, muta'ammidan, the one that intentionally, فَلْيَتَبَوَّعْ مَقْدَ مِنَ النَّارِ, he should take his seat in the hellfire. That hadith, they said, that's the best example, or one of the main example of those hadith that are used regarding hadith mutawatir lafdan wa ma'nan. To the extent, so you have that. Then they mention the second category of hadith mutawatir ma'nan, that the meaning concerning the hadith is discussing that you find hadith that may discuss different things, but they all agree upon a particular matter, a particular topic. So hadith, they said, and in that you find it more, that more hadith may fall into that category than the first category, hadith ma'nan, then they're more larger in number, more in number. So they mention of those hadith that fall into that category, that they will mention hadith, that hadith masala khufain, hadith al-hawd, and the likes will fall into that category of hadith mutawatir. So hadith mutawatir, then all hadith concerning that, so of those hadith that they fall into that category, that hadith al-hawd, the proper Islam pool, are constantly wiping under the socks, the leather socks, they fall into hadith al-mutawatir. So you find hadith of that nature, then you find it is more common. It is more common in that area. Then the next, after matter they discuss, that you find of the ulama hadith of a discussion regarding a hadith al-mutawatir that actually exists. Of ulama mentioned the meaning that was the meaning of the ulama of past, that they mentioned that those who are more inclined hadith mutawatir doesn't exist, those who mention it does exist. Of those who kind of somewhat, so you have that discussion between the ulama of hadith, especially concerning the ones of old who are more inclined towards hadith mutawatir, as defined by the ulama of usul al-fiqh, that really exists. Really exists, so they kind of some see it as rare, doesn't exist, but those who mention it does exist. So you have that discussion regarding hadith al-shafa'a, intercession of the Prophet ﷺ yawm al-qiyamah, that is a hadith of mutawatir lakin ma'nan, regarding many hadith that relates to shafa'a, but the words are different, but the meaning are same. Parts of hadith that, and also hadith of rafa yadayn, hadith rafa yadayn, also hadith mutawatir, the Prophet ﷺ that he raised his hands in making supplication. So these hadith are mutawatir. The next of the matter regarding hadith al-mutawatir, that you find that some books have been written on this topic. So you find that of the ulama who have somewhat authored a book, collected hadith that are referred to as hadith mutawatir. So of those works that are out, that are present, we have of those as Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala, who have written a book on this particular topic, that he mentioned that this book is titled Azhar متناثرة في أخبار المتواترة. So أزهار متناثرة في أخبار المتواترة. And also you have Ibn Tulun Ash-Shamsuddin Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Khumaywira or Wira, that Aurora Damashki As-Salihi, who are Hanafi, who they mentioned died 953, that also has work on this topic, and others, and others. So some works regarding hadith mutawatir, the book of Suyuti rahimahullah, that can somewhat see mutawatir regarding 10 or more narrators in each level. So 10 or more, that as we mentioned, the ulama concerned to know that hadith may be classed as mutawatir by having 4 narrators on all level, and maybe could be classed as mutawatir, or 5 or 10, as there's no set number regarding in each level, each generation, how many people are required. They have said khilaf between the ulama on this matter, but overall that this, as I said, this discussion regarding hadith mutawatir, somewhat, as I said, that mentioned by Ibn Hajar and others. Zabidi, of those also, Sadiq Hassan Khan and others who have written on this topic, Hadith Mutawatir, Jafar Kattani also have written on this topic. So you find others of the ulama have written on this particular topic regarding Hadith Mutawatir. So I said, in summary, that you might find that Hadith Mutawatir has now become, as we said now, been now accepted that as a classification of Hadith. So what is now the now established, and what is the established practice, that Hadith Mutawatir is said to be a class of Hadith, and discussed also in the books of Mustalah al-Hadith, and also in Usul al-Fiqh. It's really a topic of ilm, Usul al-Fiqh, more so than that of ilm al-Hadith. But the ulama of Hadith had mentioned that a Hadith Mutawatir, that at times they may deny that it is not from the science of ilm al-Hadith. So fans of the ulama of Hadith who said that will mention that they dismiss and reject that Hadith Mutawatir is within the science of Hadith. And those who are of that view, it is understood by Hadith Mutawatir, as mentioned, من طرق رواة الجماعة and مثلهم and مثلهم, that a group narrating upon a group and all saying the same thing from start to end, and also the same wording. They said no, those of hadith that they consider no, that is not from ilm al-hadith. But as for ilm al-hadith, which said mutawatir ad-dururi, and as for mutawatir an-nazari, then that is from hadith, where in some cases hadith, it has to be looked into, even though it have many chains and narrated by many, but still need to be looked into, to be investigated. So this is the hadith man kadhiba alayya muta'ammidan, that hadith have been narrated over, some mention over 70 different sahabi, some mention over 60 plus sahabi, so many have narrated the hadith. And you find the same thing in all this different generation. You find multitude of people narrating the hadith. So they mentioned that type of hadith that's not really from ilm al-hadith, or that category not from ilm al-hadith. As for hadith where hadith mutawatir and nazari, where hadith still may need to be looked into because they have many narrators, but it is said to be from ilm al-hadith to some degree. So that's concerning this discussion somewhat. Maybe what we have, there's more to, so that's some of the discussion or some of the points relating to hadith mutawatir. With that, inshallah ta'ala, will end. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة والحمد لله آمين.